If you'd asked me a few months ago, Frank, why do dogs need doctors? I'd have shrugged, or whatever you call the dog version of a shrug. I'm a bulldog, not exactly the picture of health in the canine kingdom, but my life is cushy enough here in Brooklyn with my human, Henry. We've got a good setup. Every morning, Henry leaves me to go to work, which I assume involves him sitting on a different couch somewhere, petting other dogs. I pretend not to care. After all, I've got a routine. Naps, chewing things I'm not supposed to, and strategically placing myself in any sunlight that comes through the window. Life was pretty simple until it wasn't. Now, don't get me wrong. I know I'm not the athletic type. The vet once muttered something about the Bulldog's curse, something about respiratory issues and extra rolls. Fine, so I wheeze a little, but one day I felt different. A nagging, uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, like I'd swallowed one of Henry's weird-smelling socks. I thought, this will pass, but it didn't. By nightfall, my tummy was doing things no tummy should do. Henry noticed, of course. He was concerned, which, to be honest, is rare. Usually, he figures I can take care of myself. But there he was, sitting beside me, petting me, and talking in that high-pitched voice I pretend not to understand. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, his eyebrows knit with worry. The next morning, I was still feeling terrible, and before I knew it, we were on the way to the vet. Now, if you've never been to a vet, consider yourself lucky. The place smells funny. It's a blend of fear, antiseptic, and sadness. Dogs sit around, waiting, nervous. They're humans whispering reassurances that none of us believe. When it was my turn, I let out my best growl, hoping they'd leave me alone. But nope, I got poked, prodded, and weighed. How humiliating. The vet, Dr. Morales, looked at Henry, all serious. "Frank here has a pretty nasty stomach infection," he said. "It's not life-threatening, but it can be if it spreads. We'll need to give him some antibiotics." Antibiotics? That sounds suspiciously like the kind of thing you'd give to someone who's close to death. I was convinced I was doomed. Henry, though, just nodded like he understood. The antibiotics weren't fun. Henry hid them in these ridiculous treats that were supposed to taste like bacon. Spoiler, they did not taste like bacon. Every time he handed me one, he'd look at me all hopeful, like, "Come on, Frank, for your health." He didn't understand the betrayal I felt, but hey, it was either eat the treat or face a second round of vet visits. After a week of forced pill-taking, I started to feel better. I don't say that lightly. My energy returned, my stomach settled, and even my appetite, for socks and otherwise, was back. It hit me then. Maybe Henry and Dr. Morales were onto something. Maybe, just maybe, there was a point to having a dog doctor. As I regained my strength, it struck me. I might have been in real trouble without Dr. Morales. I know. Me? Admitting I needed help? But listen, when your insides feel like they're doing somersaults, and your human is looking at you with those worried eyes, you start to wonder if this whole vet thing has a purpose. Henry didn't say anything, but I caught him watching me more closely after that, as if he could sense I was starting to appreciate what happened. One day, he even muttered, "Glad you're okay, Frank." He scratched behind my ears, my favorite spot, and I couldn't help it. I melted. Turns out being taken care of isn't the worst thing in the world. Of course, I couldn't resist observing the other dogs when we had our follow-up. The lobby at Dr. Morales' office was packed with all kinds of characters. Some cool, some clueless. There was a poodle named Giselle who seemed high-strung, a German shepherd with a bandaged paw, and even a chihuahua who trembled like she'd seen the ghost of a cat. Turns out none of us are as tough as we'd like to think. We all had our little problems, our secret pains. Maybe I wasn't the only one who'd thought, "Pfft, who needs a vet?" Giselle told me, okay, maybe I imagined it, that she hated getting her teeth cleaned, but that her human insisted. And yet, there she was, primped and prissy, barking her complaints to anyone who would listen. I gave her a look that said, "I get it. We're all in this together." When we got home, I thought my pill-popping days were over. Wrong. Henry, ever the diligent owner, insisted I finish the full course of antibiotics. "For your own good," he kept saying. Sure, because swallowing a chalky tablet hidden in a dubious treat every morning was exactly what I wanted. But this time, I ate them willingly. Call it newfound wisdom, call it resignation, but I knew these pills were keeping me well. I was back to my regular self, and there was no way I wanted to feel that sick again. Sometimes you just have to trust you're human and go with it. After that incident, I noticed something had changed between me and Henry. He was more attentive, and, dare I say, I was too. When he looked at me, it was like he understood. We had an unspoken agreement. He'd look after me, and I'd let him. It's funny how almost losing something makes you appreciate it. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching Henry's favorite detective show, he scratched my head absently and said, "You know, buddy, I don't know what I'd do without you." I pretended not to care, but my heart did a little flip. There's a loyalty that goes both ways, you know. Turns out, even humans can need a little reminder of it. So, why do dogs need doctors? Because sometimes we don't know what's best for ourselves. We don't realize that a little stomach ache could turn into something serious, or that the funny limp might mean a cracked paw. We're tough, sure, but even the toughest bulldog has his limits. Vets may be the stuff of nightmares, with their cold tables and strange smells, but they're also the reason we get to keep running, playing, and barking our heads off. I used to think going to the vet was a punishment, a cruel twist in an otherwise pampered life. Now, I get it. Vets are the reason dogs like me can keep chasing dreams, and sometimes my own tail, a little longer. And as for Henry, well, he may think he's the caretaker, but I know the truth. We're taking care of each other. With my illness behind me, life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets for a dog in Brooklyn with an over-attentive owner and a newly discovered respect for the vet. I could tell Henry was watching my every move, though, probably worried I'd find a new way to give him a heart attack. I'd walk to my water bowl, and he'd follow, hovering with that concerned look on his face. Don't get me wrong, I love the attention, but sometimes a bulldog just needs his space, you know? But I'll admit, the whole experience made me feel, well, lucky. Not every dog gets to have someone like Henry, someone who'll sit up with you at night when you're sick and even brave the horror of the vet's office. It's funny how, as much as we dogs act like we've got it all figured out, it's the humans who know when we're really in trouble. And for that, I'll tolerate the occasional vet visit, grudgingly, of course. One morning, while lying in the patch of sun that hits our living room just right, I started thinking about the other dogs I'd seen at Dr. Morales' office. Some looked old and frail. Others were pups just learning the ropes. I imagined what I'd tell them if they asked, "Frank, why should we trust the vet?" I'd tell them to look past the cold metal tables and the needles. I'd say that vets aren't there to scare us or make us feel small. They're there to keep us going, to keep us strong. And when your human walks out of that office with you, relief written all over his face, you'll know it was worth it. It sounds strange, coming from a tough guy like me, but sometimes life surprises you. And if there's one thing I learned from this whole ordeal, it's that sometimes even a stubborn bulldog needs a helping hand, or paw, now and then. As weeks turned into months, Henry and I fell back into our routines, but things weren't quite the same. For one thing, Henry now insists on regular checkups at Dr. Morales' office. He calls it preventative care. I call it overkill, but I'm learning to roll with it. Besides, it's not so bad seeing Dr. Morales. He's actually not a bad guy. He's got a warm voice, and he's always got a treat or two in his pocket. Plus, every time we visit, I get a little more attention from Henry, so I can't complain. And honestly, each time we go, I'm reminded of why this place matters. It's the place that kept me going when I was at my worst. It's the place that taught me that maybe, just maybe, we dogs aren't as invincible as we'd like to think. There's a saying I overheard Henry telling a friend once, something about how dogs are a man's best friend. But if you ask me, it goes both ways. Sure, I protect Henry by barking at the mailman and looking intimidating, well, as intimidating as a bulldog can, but he protects me too. He's the one who rushed me to the vet when I needed it, the one who didn't let my stubbornness get in the way of my health. We've got each other's backs. I guess that's why dogs and humans fit so well together. We might not speak the same language, but when it counts, we understand each other just fine. And if going to the vet is part of that understanding, then maybe I can live with it. Looking back on that whole experience, I can't help but feel grateful, not just for Dr. Morales, but for Henry, and for all the other humans out there who go the extra mile for their dogs. If we could talk, really talk, I think most dogs would say thank you. Because even when we act tough or pretend we don't need anyone, we know the truth. We know that without our humans, and yes, even our vets, we'd be a lot worse off. So, here's to you, Dr. Morales, and here's to Henry, and here's to all the humans who make sure their dogs stay healthy, happy, and by their sides for as long as possible. We might act like we don't appreciate it, but trust me, we do. And as for me, I'm just happy to be here, sunbathing in the window, with a full belly, a human who cares, and the quiet knowledge that, come what may, I'm in good hands.